All right. So we are live. Stay with me, guys. I'm gonna just make sure everything gets set up, ready to go. Let's see here. I just want to check, see how it sounds. Cool. I can hear everything. All right. We're waiting for Matt Blackburn to join. In the meantime, I wanted to jump on right before he gets on. Basically, just wanted to quickly give an introduction of what this podcast is going to be about. Really, my main goal for this whole podcast is to focus on interesting voices, interesting people that have a different approach or a different perspective on a certain topic, whether it be health, nutrition, fitness, all these things. I have quite a wide range of interest in regards to really just anything in life. I love making music. I studied film in college. I love sales and communication. So really the goal here is just to have open dialogues with people that I feel have a very open mind and are constantly adapting and learning. So we'll wait till Matt gets here, but I'll let Matt do a little bit of an introduction for himself. I know Matt simply through, I think, Facebook and Instagram, and I stumbled upon him while I was vegan and vegetarian. So yeah, I mean, we know each other basically through social media, but I feel if you follow somebody long enough, you can get an idea if they're a good person or if they at least know what they're doing. And I've always felt that Matt had a very interesting perspective that I appreciated and shared. So, all right, I'm gonna message him real quick. And let me make sure everything's good. And to go into more detail, also why I wanted to bring Matt on is I've obviously the channel this will be posting to is my old channel that I posted vegan videos. And I obviously want to take that in a very different direction. So for those that are subscribed and could care less about anything I have to say that's not vegan related, you're probably going to want to unsubscribe. But really, the goal is to share as much knowledge and wisdom in regards to all array of topics and discussions. And yeah, Matt's a really interesting character. So as soon as he gets on here, we can start to chat about some of his insights and his really just his path. That's another thing is I don't want this to be strictly about the field in which that person is an expert. I also want to know more about that person because I think getting to know somebody on a deeper level makes you understand their patterns of behavior and who they really are on the surface, and it gives deeper insight into the knowledge that they do have, both within their field and just in life in general. See if he's about to get on. I promise the podcast will be more interesting than these first couple minutes. I figured I'd start it early, and maybe I started a little too early, but we'll give it a second. All right, so Matt said he is just now joining. Who knows, guys? This may be my one and only podcast. If Matt doesn't show up and then I just have to sit here, I don't have much else to say. This may be the final straw. We had a good run, whole 5 minutes and 45 seconds of history with you guys. It's been a great ride. So for the there he is. All right, let me add him in. What's up, Matt?
Hey, Ryan, how you doing?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Do I sound okay?
Yep, you're good.
Okay, cool. I think I'm actually turned up. Is that still okay?
Your audio sounds good.
Perfect. Right on. Is this live or?
Yeah, it is. How do you feel about that?
That's great. That's perfect.
Yeah, as of now, I figured, is my audio good on your end?
Yeah, you sound perfect. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I figured there's obviously a ton of ways to go about it, but I personally like face to face, and since that's illegal right now, we'll stick to video.
Cool. Yeah, this will be fun.
Cool, man. Yeah, so I don't know if you were watching. I basically just gave like a quick rundown. There's really no format in which I kind of have set this up. My goal and real intention is just to kind of dive into a ton of different fields. Music's huge for me, health's huge for me. Just any type of art form, any type of creative endeavor, and really just diving into interesting people. Kind of similar to Joe Rogan. Really, no format. Just kind of go in and see what happens. So yeah, I mean, I explained how we basically, I think I've probably added you on Facebook, which tends to happen with you see vegans start adding other vegans, and I know that's probably how it started. But yeah, I wanted to touch on like where did your interest or starting into health really kind of peak, and what got you to really start down the path?
It was just a lot of failing, a lot of trial and error, and like a lot of people, I went through all the different diets and vegan, vegetarian, fruitarian, raw vegan, all the different macronutrient combinations you could do. Just kind of following different people's protocols, basically since 2010. And I kind of just did one after the other. And that led me to today, which is a more balanced approach. I'm not restricting any macronutrients. And I feel like I'm living in a more balanced way that supports the metabolism and the human body. And so a lot of, I think, why I was plant-based and why I was struggling with eating meat and animals and animal products came back to spirituality. And I was trying to like ascend or, become a magician or gain powers.
You just gave up too early.
Right? That's what they
You were
say.
so close. You were so close.
Yeah, and I've just kind of come to peace finally after I went back and forth not eating meat about at least 5, maybe 6 times. And I'm not going back now because I know the power of beef liver, grass-fed beef liver, of good grass-fed, grass-finished steak. I love my top sirloin, how that makes me feel. And even just dairy. I have goats here, and raw goat's milk to me is a superfood. Pastured eggs. I love my cream, my coffee. And these are all, I mean, it's really hard to get certain nutrients, specifically retinol, like actual vitamin A and bioavailable copper. And a lot of these minerals that are really concentrated in animal foods, even oysters and clams. Um, so yeah, just a lot of failing. I guess to answer your question, kind of led me to this place, and I really started my health journey, I would say, back in 2006 when I was becoming vegetarian due to documentaries, and then it was 2010 where I more shifted to from less ethical to more health focused. It was still ethical, but more just about supporting my health. So I started getting into grounding. I was living with my parents at the time, and I remember, having my dad help me route the grounding rod under the house to jam it in the earth, and they thought I was crazy. And
Yeah,
just
he
doing
probably thought
all
you were just installing cable or something.
right.
He had no clue what you're up to.
No, they actually knew. I mean, they thought I was crazy for a couple of years, and then now I've actually like made a living off of it and monetized my learning experience, because people will pay to shortcut, so they don't have to fail like I did, and so I can share my experience and wisdom from all the failures I've had and save
Yeah.
people time. And so that's kind of where I'm at today, just kind of helping people, kind of guide them in the right direction, and saying, don't look over here, look over here.
Yeah, and that's going back to like I think that's what started me with the vegetarian and veganism. It was a completely spiritual decision. And I think getting out of it and realizing that my body was, after 8 years essentially of no meat, this realization that this is just not working, this feeling. I think most vegans and vegetarians know that feeling. It's just there's something missing, and you like subconsciously know where that's coming from, but you're just so unwilling to admit it, because I think it's a death of that ego that comes from that way of thinking. It's like, no, the God that I believe in would never sacrifice an animal for me to survive. And I shared that for so long. And so I think that was like probably the hardest thing getting over is the spiritual implications of that. Maybe my perspective on what I understand to be reality, or what I understand how reality works, I'm going to now have to accept that in a way that I didn't really want to at all, which was that, death, kind of life eats life. And that's a part of the process, whether it's an easy thing to accept or not. It's just it's a part of what it is. And yeah, that took a while for me. That was the hardest part. I think eating meat was easy. It was getting over the psychological implications of like all the spiritual ideologies that I had held onto for so long. But
Yeah, you might have. I think from our conversations, you've went down a lot of the similar paths. Like, I was listening to a lot of Abraham Hicks and Bashar and Terrence McKenna, and I was heavy into the psychedelics for a
the way
while.
in which Terrence.
Yeah, I mean, you start to learn, like, Daniel Pinchbeck. There's a lot of characters. I mean, I went
Mhm.
to music festivals and I was listening to these people on stage, and I mean, you start to hear about what they're doing behind the scenes too, and how they're living their life, and you're like, why am I listening to someone that's not living in integrity, that's talking about fractal realities and how
Yeah.
everything's fractal and a hologram? And that's really what started to kind of shift the gears for me away from that kind of thinking. Like, the people that share that ideology are usually just completely wonky, and their life's a wreck, and they don't have any like moral compass that they're
Yeah.
going by.
Yeah, I mean, I know we may not share exactly the same beliefs in regards to following specific ideologies or beliefs, but one thing that I think is consistent with people I find a connection to and in some way can find level ground is really just a belief in God, and a belief in a humbling to a higher power that you kind of in a lot of ways have to surrender to. And I noticed when I lived in Colorado for years, like a lot of the psychedelic community that was around there, it's the identification that I am God, or I am a God, and there's nothing I can relate to within that. And I think that's where a lot of the danger comes in, because then you're not there's not this humble individual that knows they are not the center of the universe, and they know that there's so much more to the world. That yeah, that was kind of the main thing that I felt I had to move away from, is this new agey I am God, transcending, and recognize like maybe I don't have to. I may not believe in a specific religion, but yeah, I've always held on to that understanding that it's a constant humbling to God and to that higher power and that intelligence that I have to daily practice, daily pray, daily meditate to really connect with, and to have a sense of spiritual connectivity in life. Otherwise, it's just you being your own God, you have no direction, and you constantly are hitting these walls of shallowness and emptiness that it never ends, and it just keeps repeating of the same pattern over and over.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it is a direction, but I think it's a direction towards Satanism. And that's really what led me back to a relationship with Jesus Christ. And you don't really have to call it Christianity. I just call it relationship with Jesus. But Helena Blavatsky and Aleister Crowley, These were big influencers of the New Age movement. And a lot of the New Age tenets, a lot of their beliefs take the same exact, it's like pretty much mirroring Satanism principles, like the I am God that you just mentioned, or the moral relativism, like there's no such thing as good or bad. That's probably the most destructive belief, in my opinion.
Yeah, you hear that from a lot of predators at these ecstatic dances and stuff. They tend to try to blur the lines between what's appropriate touch and what's not. So
yeah, and I keep hearing like prominent New Age musicians, singing like indigenous songs or whatever. Like,
I've recently heard about that as well.
Yeah,
yeah,
coming out and all these stories of women hiking with them and them doing crazy stuff and pulling stuff out that they shouldn't.
Yeah, yeah, it's I really do feel when you don't have a belief that there's a higher intelligence or God, that you don't have really any reason to feel bad for your behavior, or to feel that in some way there's a connection to the harming of this other individual. It's just, I'm God, so why would it essentially matter? And yeah, it goes down a huge dark rabbit hole. But yeah, I found that to become clearer as well when I kind of let go of the veganism, because it started to distort really my perspective on life in general, which I think is a fascinating thing to dive into, is like the psychology of why it's being pushed nowadays so much, and why it's so popular. It's I feel it's maybe lost a little traction, which is a good thing in the last year or two, but yeah, I mean it's I think there's good reason for why it's been pushed so heavily. And yeah, I don't know if you wanted to touch on that anymore before we move forward.
Yeah, I think it was early last year where Arnold Schwarzenegger was starring in one of those vegan plant-based documentaries,
which is just hilarious
now, right? And he's obviously eating meat. Like, you can tell the people that are faking it. There's multiple of these characters that have a ton of muscle, and it's like there's no way they're surviving on a plant-based diet.
Yeah.
So they're doing it for the money and for the fame or power or whatever. And I think the most recent one was called Game Changers, and these are often pushed through Netflix or even YouTube. I'll see YouTube movies now is pretty popular because the TVs you buy at Costco, it already has YouTube installed. And unfortunately, these other platforms that are less censored, that don't have videos taken down, like BitChute, has a lot of great content. That's not embedded in that Costco TV, but you have YouTube, and YouTube is it's just kind of like Netflix, maybe a little less censored, but pretty much the same to a degree. You have to find underground channels, and they'll push.
Oh, it's searching now is the most ridiculous thing on YouTube, because you can type in the exact words, the exact phrasing of a video, and if it's something they don't want you to see, that's going to take 2 pages to find it, 3 pages, 4 pages.
Yeah, I find it's easier on a computer, like if you can somehow hook up a laptop to the computer, but doing it right through the TV with that little remote, it's ridiculous. But yeah, getting back to the vegan documentaries, I think there's multiple agendas at play, and I've had a few episodes on transhumanism, and that's been a fascination of mine for years, like the cyborg, artificial intelligence, singularity kind of movement. Kind of becoming, it's like human plus. That's basically the idea of transhumanism in a nutshell. It's like doing better than what God designed us to be.
So
supposedly.
Touching on that, because this is something I've always struggled with, is I share the same, a lot of the same beliefs with you with transhumanism. I see the psychology that the train it goes down, and how really dark and the ultimate goal, like the idea of basically becoming AI. I'm not necessarily on board with that, but the idea of where is the middle ground of that, because obviously what we're doing right now is not possible without some form of technology. My belief, I'll throw it out there and then see what your opinion is. My belief is this technology is just an extension of the consciousness that created it, that it goes into it. If the individual, if their intention is power, is the fear of death, they're going to want the idea of the transcendental AI put our brains into computers mentality. But for somebody like you and I who believe in God and believe in an afterlife or believe in some way a connection of their, I don't necessarily desire to put my brain in a computer and live forever. So where is the middle ground in that for you?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with Star Wars, and for a while, I would say Star Wars was my spiritual belief system. And I've heard some things about just George Lucas and his upbringing and his beliefs, which he was the director of the Star Wars saga,
Mm-hmm.
and so you have to, I think, look at that critically. But um, always thought that the idea of C3PO and R2D2 and droids was awesome. Like if I never had to wash the dishes again or clean the dishes, or even my partner or girlfriend or wife did not have to do that. I mean, that frees up time, exponent, like tons of time.
Mm-hmm.
Or just really, menial tasks, doing the laundry. If we never had to do any of that stuff, and I often go to grocery stores and see these people at the checkout, and I'm just thinking like a robot could do that job. It's like
Yeah.
I mean, it's human interaction, and that's awesome, but we don't need to get human interaction from the cashier at the health food store.
It's unless you're at a small town grocery store, the chances of that person enjoying their job and actually wanting to connect is very small.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And so I'm definitely taking middle ground. I think like you, like of course with droids, there's like the aspect of them being hacked and killing you in your own home or something. But then again, there's firewalls and there's really intelligent people that can have software in your computer to protect it, and not even mainstream software, like underground kind of software that actually works better, has no backdoors and stuff. So anyway, that said, I think if someone lops off their arm with the chainsaw where they're working to get a bionic robotic arm, I think that's fine. But when it comes to like Neuralink, like Elon Musk is talking about, and implanting chips and things with computing power inside the human body, that's where we draw the line. And in the Bible, it talks about the mark of the beast being implanted in the wrist or the forehead. And every year almost it seems like there's someone screaming from the mountaintops, "It's here, 666, the mark of the beast!" And
Yeah.
now people are talking about Bill Gates and the whole contact tracing thing. And I don't know if you saw the patent. It was like
2020 060606. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, what is that? That just happens. It's, and then did you see the I can't remember exactly what it was, an enzyme that I think they said would help with the chip working, something along those lines, that Bill Gates was connected to, and the luferase was the name of the enzyme. I was just like, at a certain point, enough coincidences, how much can you give room for, like, just coincidence versus, okay, there's intelligent design behind this, or some mind going into this for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So I like what you said about the fear of death being pro AI. I personally believe the world's being run by pedophile Satanists. I think that's pretty obvious. You look at the Clintons.
I slowly lead up to that for people, but I'm like, most people don't want to hear that. So I say, you don't want to hear my final answer, but I'll give you some stuff to lead you in that direction.
Yeah, it's definitely something that people have to look into, but I think having a functional brain helps, and a lot of people are still working on that, unfortunately, just because the tap water and the spring water, and there's multiple things impacting neuronal function and oxygen utilization in the neurons. But like what you said, fear of death makes people pro artificial intelligence, and you look at people at the top, the people that are in positions of power. And I mean, they're drinking Diet Cokes out of aluminum cans, high fructose corn syrup, just Mountain Dews, eating McDonald's. And their whole concept is, who cares? I mean, you can see photos of Trump and Obama and, people and the government just eating fast food and drinking soda constantly. And I think that's because they believe that with a certain amount of money, they can buy longevity. And they call it the longevity escape velocity, I believe. These are people that are usually like pro pharmaceutical, pro singularity, pro AI. And it's the idea that if you can keep up with the technology, then every 5 years or so there will be a leap that will add another like 10 years to your life. And so if you can just keep up with the times and keep
in the meantime, drink blood and just do what you can do to get by. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm over here like there's so many natural ways to extend life, in my opinion, like sleeping on a Magnetico or drinking pristine bicarbonate-rich acid-free water. Even drinking coffee extends your life dramatically. Um, Eating carbohydrates frequently, vitamin E. There's so many things you can do that are so effective,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess people just don't think they move the needle enough. But I mean, these things are 20% lifespan increase, like a lot.
So, wrapping that up, because I want to actually dive into that now. But basically, it sounds like from what you said, kind of maximizing efficiency and life quality without kind of diving into the psychological and really the internalizing of technology into the human body and in a way that is I think the distortion of perception and and the way in which you experience reality, I think that's where it starts to get really dangerous. And obviously you can say that like a phone is a total alterance of how we experience reality, but it is still an externalized form of that technology. And I would agree with you. It's like once you start getting into implementation into the human brain and nanotechnology that's flowing through your blood, like that's where to me it's there's no longer a separation, and that is where somebody is trying to play God, and I think that's where it kind of takes us away from the initial goal, or at least the way in which life was kind of meant to be experienced.
Yeah, that's well said. And I see people that are ignorant about natural health often going to those little nanobots. Like, I've heard family members like say like, oh, there's nanobots that can clean up, cancerous cells. And I'm like, did you know systemic enzyme therapy does the exact same thing?
Yeah.
Like Nicholas Gonzalez, multiple doctors have used systemic enzyme therapy to clean up proteins that shouldn't be in the body. It's like,
yeah, where do you think they're getting this understanding of how like to make the nanotech work? It's the body's already designed to do these things. And I think that highlights really how distorted our societal understanding of life is that everything is technology and science. These are our gods. These are what hold truths. But all those things are based around the intelligence that already is existing in reality, and we're pulling from that. And we forget that step nowadays because I think we're so far removed from it. You go out on a 3-day camping trip and you're immediately reminded, oh yeah, there's an intelligence way beyond me that has already existed prior to my being here. And you almost, I think that's where that sense of peace comes, because you're putting your trust back into that. But when you put it into Instagram and the latest news on anything, it's just this feeling of emptiness, because there's no real weight to it. There's no real truth to it. It's empty.
Yeah. We can't mimic what God created. People have tried and they've failed. And so, even the airplane is a poor example of flight compared to the bird and the bat. And I think for me, it's realizing that pristine or absolutely clean air, food, and water are what creates ultimate health, where we don't need technology in crazy amounts or pharmaceutical drugs and all these things. But the catch is we don't have those three things anymore. The air is unclean, the food's unclean, the water's unclean, and you have to do a lot of work and spend some money actually to get those things, which is kind of sad, or spend money to mitigate those things. And so that's, to me, the context of where we're at today. And the driving force for me behind my business, MitoLife, and my podcast, MitoLife Radio, is kind of sharing that context. Like, hey guys, we're not in the Garden of Eden anymore. This is like, this is different times. Mm-hmm. Everything is pretty much contaminated. And so we have to do our best, but doing our best is not merging with the machines, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if for people that don't know Matt's story, I know that you were, kind of behind, I don't know how much you want to care to talk about it, but you were big into basically DHA and selling algae oil for a while. And then kind of out of the blue, it was like you, from my perspective, knowing you only through social media, it was like, oh, Matt's no longer about this, and you went back to eating meat almost immediately. You started sharing your kind of like spirit, coming back to Christianity, and at least a relationship with Jesus Christ, and then recognizing like almost immediately that DHA is not what it's touted to be. And I wanted to touch on that because yeah, it was I guess my perspective from it was, it I guess I didn't have much knowledge of really DHA in regards to doing my own research. I kind of trusted a lot of people, but I never really had. I always kind of go intuitively and just what my body's constantly craving to have, and I never had a desire to use. And even before I knew this, to use fish oil for the most part. But yeah, I mean, when did you discover Ray Peat's work, and why was it such a like aha moment?
Yeah, so I basically had a nervous breakdown when I was doing OMAD, 1 meal a day. I was fasting for 23 hours a day.
I did that for a short time.
I think I remember that. And I was eating 1 hour, and I would set the timer on my phone. Like, I was very strict. And unfortunately, it was soy and beans and royal jelly and bread and chocolate that was kind of the majority of my diet. But I was drinking coffee black and just really running on stress hormones. And basically, I broke down, just emotionally, mentally. I just had a breakdown. And
maybe you were ascending.
Right.
maybe that was it.
It could have been. Yeah, I was about to lose my body. And so and so I had heard of this guy, Adam Bergstrom. I've had him on my podcast a few times. I think he'd be a great guest for you. It's really fun to talk to. And he has been talking about yellow fat disease or lipofuscin for many years. And while I was in this business, I came to my business partner, 50-50 business partner. I was like, hey, I think this stuff is toxic. Like, we should look into it. Like, I think there's something wrong with algae oil. He's like, no, we're making money. Don't worry about it. And that just really bothered me. And when I started to like have physical effects of breaking down, I started to like look at Adam Bergstrom's work a little more seriously. And he pulls a lot from Raymond Peat, PhD. And so I looked at Ray Peat's work, which is like the direct source. And he sources from Hans Selye, Rhoda Barnes, and people that are talking about thyroid health like way back, like in the early 1900s. And Albert St. George is another one. He sources a lot of people's work. And basically, I started to change my opinion on fats and what is the definition of a good, healthy fat. And in the keto community, or even carnivore community, you often hear that omega-3s or polyunsaturated fats, like found in seafood, for example, are good fats. And I took that to the extreme. I think
I remember. Yeah. You convinced me while I was vegan. I was like, all right, I'll try some oysters to see if it helps.
Yeah, and oysters were the best thing you could have done, because at least you're getting, copper, zinc, and selenium, which are probably the best part of oysters and still makes them worth eating. But I mean, I was living in an RV in South San Diego, Chula Vista, and I was doing ice baths and noonday sun naked. I would pre-dose with DHA, like at least 4 grams before I went out naked, grounded in an ice bath, filtered water, of course, and just like extreme bathing, sun gazing, religiously, like blocking blue light at night and getting light in my eyes in the morning, which I think is a pretty good practice anyway, but I don't think you need to look towards the sun. But just getting really into like circadian rhythm and that connection with DHA, which was supposedly there. And I bought it. There's research by Bazan that was shared where he said that DHA was like a quantum superconductor, which allowed photons to, change their form or basically donate more electricity to the nervous system. And I really bought these ideas. I mean, I was taking my own medicine, like, if you want to call it medicine. I would do shots of like the whole bottle, like 30 grams. And so there are a lot of supplement makers that don't take their own supplements. I've seen it, but I was not one of those. I was megadosing. Well, my partner wasn't taking any, and I was like 4 grams a day minimum, sometimes 30 grams a day. And I broke down, and it just caused me to, it was another one of my failures to look at. And I felt kind of bad because I was promoting this, but I was promoting it because there was 20,000 plus studies on the benefits of fish oil, krill oil, algae oil, omega-3s, and the research is called N-3. Basically polyunsaturated fats or highly unsaturated fats. These are all the same names. And it's DHA, EPA, and ALA. And people think, oh, there's, those are impossible to be bad for you because Harvard's saying they're good. All these universities are saying they're good. All the research.
The Rothschild said it's good. Why would it? Why,
right.
Why would I not believe that?
And you start to follow the money and seeing just who's funding these studies. And I mean, you could really set up a study to show anything. I think the studies that should be looked at are the studies on aspirin. I mean, you could buy 1,000 tablets of aspirin for $12 on Amazon. It's so cheap and it's so effective against multiple different diseases, multiple different conditions. Versus algae oil or fish oil, you're spending $50, $60, $70, $80 on this little bottle that's accumulating in your system and causing yellow fat disease or lipofuscin. And that's really what I've been delving into the last few years is people have often heard of calcification, just like a buildup of calcium, this coral reef in the tissues that makes it hurt when someone squeezes you or puts pressure. But lipofuscin is something you see on old people, elderly people, usually on the forehead, these spots on the hands, these brown spots. And
it's frightening to see Jack Cruz, like how bad. I mean, dude, I remember 5 years ago, like he didn't look necessarily great 5 years ago, but the picture you recently shared, it's kind of frightening how much discoloration and stuff he has going.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And he's the kind of guy where he doesn't like, if I start failing at an experiment, I quit immediately. There's certain people who just keep going to the grave. And I think he's one of those, unfortunately. I think there might be a point of no return with age pigment and lipofuscin, because when you see so many spots all over the face, I mean, it's kind of bad when it's on the forehead, but when it starts creeping down the face, it's like, that's a lot of age pigment. And that's just what you can see.
What are the implications of when you start to physically see lipofuscin throughout the skin? What is that essentially saying about your physiology or what's happening internally?
That you can't perform autophagy. And so autophagy is like the big buzzword right now in the health community. And
it's why I only eat 1 meal a week. So
and it's cellular recycling, right? It's like cellular repair, and people are like, sleep's not enough, I have to do extra, and I have to give the body extra time to heal. But in fact, it's doing the opposite. It's actually aging people, not only because the cortisol and adrenaline release, but in the stored PUFAs and the fat from all the omega-3 supplements or seed oils or cold water seafood they ate. But the long-term implications are how these omega-3 fats become complex. You could call it like cross-linking, kind of like glycation, with iron, estrogen, and other metals, aluminum. And it's largely iron and estrogen, which is a stress hormone, not a female hormone, and omega-3s. And so it forms this pigment called ceroid pigment. It's like a yellow-brown pigment that actually fluoresces under light stimulation. They actually use it in surgery because if they shine a certain wavelength of light on it, it actually reflects back. And it reacts mostly with blue wavelength light, funny enough, which is what's being promoted as the benefit. Like you want to get DHA and then expose that DHA to blue light for the benefit. But blue light is what excites it. And when it's excited, it actually spreads. And so getting back to your question, we have something in the cells called the lysosomes. So you have proteasomes and lysosomes, and these are kind of recycling centers for the cell. So when there's unwanted proteins or lipids, so proteins and fats that the cell doesn't need or that are toxic, then it sends them to this garbage plant, which is called the lysosome. And the lysosome is like this sack of enzymes. And what happens is the lipofuscin is just taking up space. So imagine the sack and it's just becoming full, 40, 50, 60% of lipofuscin. And when it takes up space, it crowds out these enzymes, and the lysosome actually can't function. And so the rate of digestion of these unwanted fats and proteins goes down. And then autophagy eventually slows to almost nothing. And so, yeah, that's the biggest problem with lipofuscin, is that it inhibits the function of autophagy via the lysosomes.
So in regards to autophagy, when because I know you aren't as much of a proponent of fasting as obviously like everyone nowadays is. It's the longevity. It's a key to longevity. You know, you fast, you're gonna live forever. And so I've been on the fence about it because I felt after veganism I had some kind of thyroid issues because I did the whole 1 meal a day thing, and then I did pretty much intermittent fasting from there on out when I stopped doing 1 meal a day. And even into eating meat, I was pretty much doing intermittent fasting. And only recently, I basically started. You know, I don't follow to a T, but I I would do a little bit of coffee before I worked out with some like whole milk. And then right after working out, like 10:30, I would eat some eggs, some carbs, and then have a coffee. And I can say without question that I felt better. And, you know, like raw honey and stuff like that on some bread, like sourdough bread. I felt better doing that in the last like month than probably any other routine of intermittent fasting and all that stuff. Because what I would find is like around 11:30 to 11:30 or so after I hadn't eaten and I had some coffee, it was just this like overwhelming anxiety that of like I can't focus. I'm like I'm anxious, and it was a kind of an unconscious decision to start working out in the morning and eating earlier. But the second I started doing it, I noticed like this immediate when I'm done after that, I'm calm, I'm focused, I'm centered, and there's not this. The anxiety was the main thing that I realized. So I'm sure obviously working out is helping to some degree to get you know, maybe a little bit of energy out, but yeah, I mean, I guess touching on that, like what is the best way in which you can enact autophagy naturally without necessarily intermittent fasting all the time, or, you know, daily fast, or even if that is something you recommend, like what's the best way to go about it?
Yeah, multiple ways. I think uh, being aware of your polyunsaturated fat intake. So eating more saturated than unsaturated fats. And by definition, that is including animal foods, because the only saturated fat in the plant-based diet is coconuts. And maybe you live in Hawaii or somewhere with a lot of those brown coconuts. That might be doable. I have a fruitarian friend doing that kind of thing. So he's getting his sugar and his saturated fat, which to me is pretty good. But most people have no clue. And so they don't know the ratio of what they're eating of saturated versus unsaturated. So if you can lower your unsaturated fats like below 4 grams a day,
Mm-hmm.
it's nothing to be neurotic about. I'm a former orthorexic. I speak out about orthorexia now. I go out for burgers and fries frequently. There's a local joint. It's pretty good. And I just mitigate. I do my best. I focus on clean air and water and the best food when I'm home, and when I'm out, I just have fun. So,
Yeah.
um, you know, even eggs have PUFAs. Depending on what the chicken was eating, one egg could have up to 1 gram of polyunsaturated fat. That said, there's also choline and B vitamins, which helps the liver to kick out these PUFAs. Because a lot of, just like the fat soluble vitamins, just like A, D, E, and K, these PUFAs get stored in the liver. And so they're responsible for NAFLD, called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. A lot of liver issues come from a high PUFA diet. And again, it's omega-3 supplements, cold water seafood, like a pescatarian diet, which does it too, um, and seed oils. So cooking with canola oil or sunflower oil or safflower oil. Um, and so, or even olive oil, in my opinion, you shouldn't cook with that. So lowering your PUFA intake, throwing out your omega-3 supplements, taking vitamin E can help. It doesn't have to be mine. It could be just any. Just try to get a soy-free vitamin E, even 400 IUs a day. It's a very cheap supplement, very effective. Um, Try to avoid soy as the base for that, and that will help to lower the PUFAs, because there's this seesaw relationship with PUFA and vitamin E. PUFAs deplete vitamin E just like iron depletes magnesium through stress. And to me, when you sleep, autophagy is all you need. And the problem is most people fast before bed. That's the absolute worst thing you could do. A lot of people need honey or milk or maybe even ice cream before bed
Mm-hmm.
or in the middle of the night, or a glass of orange juice to fill the liver with glycogen, which is our battery pack. And when that battery pack goes empty and we have cortisol that releases, because it's cortisol's highest in the morning, then and then they do black coffee and they don't eat till noon or 1
Yeah.
p.m. They're just prolonging the cortisol. And what that cortisol is doing is it's causing the release, cortisol and adrenaline, the release of free fatty acids from the adipose tissue, aka it's eating the muscles and the fat to get sugar. Because if you don't give the body sugar, this is what I learned the hard way, it's going to eat you to get its sugar. And it's going to make, gluconeogenesis is another one of these buzzwords used like autophagy. And that's basically, this is what the keto, carnivore, paleo people say. You don't need to eat carbs. You could be zero carb, because the liver will, you just poke the liver and say, hey, perform gluconeogenesis, do it. I need, I don't want to eat sugar. I don't want to, listen to God's design. And it's a stress, big surprise. And another big surprise is that gluconeogenesis derived glucose doesn't have the same effect as glucose derived from carbohydrate sources. And so our liver has multiple detox pathways that's well known in the functional medicine space, phase 1, phase 2. People use different herbs and all this crazy stuff to do it. How about you just eat carbs? Because the liver does 500 functions and it requires glycogen, not only to do those 500 functions, but to convert inactive thyroid hormone T4 to active T3. And that hormone, active T3 thyroid hormone, is the only hormone that's used in every cell in your entire body to utilize the food that you eat. And that's like the biggest soundbite tweet that people need to hear, because they don't get that. They think that just by restricting sugar, the body can function, but you're really forcing it into a backup system. And you don't have thyroid hormone. And that's needed to make ATP.
I think that's, so I did, when I first went on, which is hilarious because I stopped being vegan and then I went straight into essentially keto. So I'm like, let's end this stress and go, I'm sure it's, it's substantially less. At least I'm getting some actual vitamins and nutrients in my food. But I did keto for the first month and a half, and I did it pretty consistently, and I was training really hard. So I'm sure my body was just stressed to the max, but that was the worst sleep I'd ever gotten in my entire life. And yeah, so for me, it was, I just don't see how this can be natural when my body is just every hour or so I'd be awake, and I woke up just never fully rested. And I had looked up, people talking about it's just a beginning phase of keto. Your body will adjust, but mine never did. And I just kept, and maybe my body was already too stressed. Maybe if, I had been on years of a healthy animal-based diet, maybe it would have slid into better sleep. But yeah, that to me was kind of a red flag. And I think that's where, when I started seeing what you were talking about, because at the end of the day, I think anything that is somewhat of a natural desire, I've never been in a state where sugar does not sound in some way appetizing, not like having a piece of cake, but I remember when I would work out on keto, a few times I had to actually get into my car and drive as fast as I could to the store to get some fucking fruit, because I felt like my blood sugar dropped so low. So yeah, there was just this feeling that something wasn't right going on. And I'm not trying to pander to you and say you're totally right, but that was just my own experience. So when I heard your opinion on the whole sugar ordeal, it was okay, I can breathe again. I don't have to be restricting sugar, and I don't have to be fighting this urge constantly and kind of ignoring all these symptoms of a lack of sleep and huge drops in blood sugar when I'm working out. And even if I may not take it to an extreme and do tons of sugar, having some fruit after workout, using raw honey, having some sourdough bread, or whatever it is, I'm not thinking about food in a way that I was, and I can just actually relax about it, which I think is probably the healthiest thing you can do just in general. Is not, most people that live long are usually there's people that smoke cigarettes and drink till they're 102, but they just didn't care. They just allowed themselves to do it, which is a funny insight.
Yeah, and there's likely benefits in the research it shows to nicotine and ethanol with certain context in there. But yeah, it's funny you say that you could breathe again, because people don't think about carbon dioxide. Like Wim Hof is trending, but Buteyko breathing is better, because with Wim Hof style breathing, you're actually breathing off a ton of carbon dioxide, where you want to actually retain that carbon dioxide because it's beneficial. I think of it as like the gatekeeper to oxygen. Albert St. Georgie is the guy that has a lot of good information on this, but
I've enjoyed, listening to your podcast with him, man. That guy knows a lot.
Yeah, maybe was it
Oh, wait. I
thinking, or Morley Robbins, or
I thought you said Georgie. I swear you do you know.
Oh yeah, this is like a Nobel Prize guy, but Georgie's awesome too.
yeah, that guy. Okay, well, we're getting mixed up, but yeah, that the one that you interview, I've anyways.
He's like Ray P. I don't know how like I can't memorize specific years and the results of studies like they can. It's just not how my mind works. I think more in like connecting the dots and relationships and stuff. But it's amazing how their mind works. And it's my understanding that carbon dioxide, or CO2, people think of it as a waste product, but it actually is the gatekeeper for oxygen. And so to get oxygen into the cell, you need carbon dioxide. And the best way to get carbon dioxide, I mean, you could bag breathe, you could take carbon dioxide baths. There's multiple ways to do it, but the most practical, natural way to do it is to just eat sugar, because carbohydrate / sugar, what you do is you actually generate 50% more CO2 and you use 50% less water, versus oxidizing free fatty acids in the mitochondria. And so that it gets into like biochemistry, glycolysis, oxidative metabolism, or oxidative phosphorylation. But essentially, it's my understanding that when you eat carbohydrates, the cell is able to perform cellular respiration better, and everything flows better, and you generate less reactive oxygen species, and everything just works. But if you restrict sugar, then you're like forcing the body to oxidize free fatty acids, and that actually destroys the mitochondria while that's happening.
So to throw in an argument that I'm sure you hear all the time, when people are like, well, native civilizations, didn't have access to this much sugar. What's kind of your counter argument to this? Because in a lot of ways, like obviously our biology is a product of our environment, and first off, I guess, do you think older civilizations had access to like stored sugars like honey and stuff like that? And then on top of that, is that even relevant now? Like in considering the circumstances we live in?
Yeah, good question. So I feel like there's a couple aspects to that. The first one that comes to mind is that fruit and other sugar sources, unless it's maybe honey that's been found in the pyramids, but you're not going to find fruit at archaeological dig sites. So you're not going to find residue of fruit because it's all gone.
Yeah.
You'll find bones of animals and different things, but you're not going to find fruit or evidence that they were eating berries. And so that's
contradictory to what any raw vegan will tell you. I'm sure they have their own. They'll find a way to convince you that they were all frugivores.
Right. Yeah, and for me, like I always go back to I wasn't there, and so I think a lot of people will read an article, especially from a prestigious university, and say, "Oh wow, this is how it was 10,000 years ago or 15,000 years ago." And where I'm coming from is I'm a creationist. I don't believe in evolution, and that gets into a whole another can of worms. But I think it's the evidence for evolution is just hilarious, and the Big Bang and all that to me is an absolute joke. That something can be created from nothing, that's just insane. But that's another aspect to me. And then the other aspect is just the weather that has changed over time. I don't know. My friend Rob Matt made a great video on debunking evolution. He actually had videos on humans living with dinosaurs at the same time. The evidence for that, the scientific evidence. Tyler Powell has there's a great YouTube channel called Standing for Truth. That's a good source if someone wants to look into how ridiculous evolution is. But yeah, I mean, the other thing too is the context of stress. And so back then, whatever timestamp you want to give from back in the past, we didn't have sirens. We didn't have, stuck in traffic. We didn't have text messages and phone calls and these constant alerts rattling our nervous system. We didn't have alarms by our bed. We didn't have non-native EMFs, air pollution, NPK fertilizer, tons of pesticides and stuff in our food. We didn't have, food colorings and synthetic chemicals, all these things. It's like the stress that we're exposed to today is not the same stress that our ancestors, however far back you want to go, were exposed to. All these things are fairly new. And so stress is the perceived need for sugar. And so you can actually shut down the stress response with sugar or carbohydrates. So I'm talking about fruit, potatoes, white rice, maple syrup, honey. These are all good. And if you want to do sucrose, like some white sugar in your honey, it's way better to me than stevia or monk fruit. Those are fake sugars that I used to use that now taste horrible to me. Why not just use straight sucrose? It's clean. And when you consume carbs, you're actually shutting down the cortisol response, especially if you consume it with a protein. That's an animal food. If you combine those together, like milk to me is one of the perfect things because it has all of it going. But like milk is a great thing to shut down stress. So that to me is like the number one argument. I mentioned some others, but that would probably be the one I would respond the most with, that we get multiple times. I mean, Morley Robbins have had my podcast. He made a point that we're exposed to more stress in one day than our great grandparents were in their entire lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah. So why do you think, based on, I mean, I'm sure there's tons of levels to this, but like keto, Wim Hof method, fasting, like all these things that essentially are intensifying the cortisol, like are increasing cortisol and stress, like, yeah, whether the answer is from a psychological perspective or what, like, what do you think is fueling this just need or desire to like keep fueling this system of stress? And I'm really, I've always been fascinated with that, considering where I'm at now, where it's like, nutrition and taking care of my body is still really important to me, but it feels so much easier. Like I'll eat 3 or 4 eggs in the morning with a piece of sourdough toast, some butter and raw honey. And then for dinner, I'll essentially, some meat and potatoes or something along those lines. And it feels so much better than I ever did. But it's like this, I guess it kind of goes back to our initial topic, but seeing people where it's, no sugar, and I take cold showers every morning, and I don't eat until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. It's almost like a contest to see who can avoid living a normal life that doesn't, is constantly challenging you to such an extreme.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think back to when I worked 3 jobs at once and was going to school, and just that constant go, go, go. And I felt great. Like I felt like I could keep up with it to a degree, but it's really a reflection of that culture that our world is stuck in, especially in developed countries, where it's just do more, nonstop, no days off, that kind of just like constant, because that's not sustainable and it's not natural. No animal in nature is constantly just go, 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 go. I mean, maybe there's one, I don't know, but it's just people burn out.
Let's say maybe squirrels. That's like they seem like they're never fucking slowing down. So we'll go with that.
Hummingbirds, they're always
eating
our sugar here, sugar water. But yeah, it's just people burn out. I mean, you see it. Someone that just works, 80-hour work weeks, they're eventually a couple times a year, they're going to get the flu or the cold. and that's forcing them to slow down. And so your question with why are people drawn to these stress inducing practices, I believe it's because roller coasters feel good, theme parks feel good, adrenaline highs feel good. Uh, you know, to in a certain way, people like flipping each other off on the freeway, or getting in road rage fights or arguments with their coworkers or their spouse. And I mean, to me, that's like hell. That's partly why I moved out of the city, to get out of that whole cycle, because it just is a complete waste of time. You're just releasing some anger for what? Because you're caught in the rat race and you know it, and you just get to flip someone off and you're like, oh, that felt good. And then back to the boring grind, just monotonous grind. And so, yeah, I feel like people need to slow down, and homesteading is a really great way to do that. Of course, people, bills to pay and debt to pay off and student loans and stuff, but it's at least a direction to head towards, I believe. I look at the cities as death camps, and I believe it's moving into kind of like into a smart city style platform that's been talked about, where everything's connected. Your microwave oven is Wi-Fi, and everything's on a timer, and everything's connected to the grid. And that's very scary. I mean, we're heading towards like Terminator kind of Skynet kind of stuff. And so I really believe one of the practical solutions for people that this resonates with is to get the heck out of the city when you can, into a more rural environment. And you don't have to move to a cabin in the woods where you don't see anyone for months, but just relatively outside of the city or to a smaller city. To me, I believe that's the way to go.
Do you see, and I in a lot of ways agree with you. And then also, I sit here and think, well, there's however many people on the earth, and is there, let's say you take all the bad intentions of people, and you put some actual people, some experts at the top that genuinely care about the well-being of humanity and the future of humanity. Do you see in any way cities being able to thrive in harmony with nature? Do you think cities as a whole are kind of an anti nature idea? Do you think cities can exist in a way that are in harmony, or is it just the nature of a city kind of a byproduct of just too many humans, and we're already kind of past the point of living in harmony with nature?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the population density. Because I mean, there's even just the non-native EMF issue of everyone owning like 8 or 10 devices, and those emitting Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. And when you move into a city, you just see tons of Wi-Fi bubbles when you pull it up on your phone. And to me, that's one of the biggest issues, and that everyone's just compacted in this kind of human factory farm. I mean, you look at an apartment complex and a factory farm, CAFO, and it's very similar. Yeah. And of course, there's mitigations. I mean, I've done it. I've lived in an apartment and did the best I could at the time. But I think once you get over a certain population, I don't know if that's 10,000 people or 15,000 people or 20,000, it just gets bad. And to me, everyone's kind of compacted in these small areas. I mean, you have San Diego, Los Angeles, Seattle, Austin, New York City, Miami. I mean, I don't know, Denver. There's like concentrates of people, or just insane amounts of people in a very, very small area. And then you have huge stretches of just nothing in between. And granted, I mean, there's no water in a lot of these places. It's desert, but I'm sure there's, wells and aquifers in a lot of the places as well. But I think it's just a mismanagement of land. Of course, we need wilderness and, places without houses. But I do think that we are just hyper concentrated in areas, and that's a major part of the problem. I do believe, I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people are past the point of no return from a psychological standpoint. to where they're still so just like the Matrix, they're so dependent on the system that they'll
Yeah.
fight to protect it. And there's no turning back. And so I feel like that's the population with your problem of the population. I feel like that's part of the answer right there. Was like a lot of people are just doomed because of their mindset. And there's no, I mean, they will die before they change their mind. And we've all met people like that.
It's, I mean, in the last 3 months, the intensifying of that awareness or that mindset is just, it's horrifying in a lot of ways. I mean, there is no gray anymore whatsoever. It is like you're either black or you're white, or you're white or you're black. There's no in between there. And it's yeah, I mean, it's really only intensified in the last couple months. And I think yeah, I guess maybe touching on that, like, you know, with this whole terrible virus that you know, that has arisen, it's like, I personally think there's obviously a ton of psychological warfare going on. This is just an experiment. So I think that has a huge play. But I always do give credit to the human mind. And I do feel we all deep down have that spiritual sight and know. And if we are not consciously aware of it on the surface of our day to day, that it's like this deep rooted subconscious fear that's being triggered. And I feel like partially why the reason we are so polarized right now is because I think everybody knows what's really going on. I really do feel like everybody subconsciously knows this is a spiritual battle that's taking place. And the denial of that is just intensifying everyone's feelings about everything now. And anything that is a slight reminder of truth is a trigger. And so that needs to be attacked and shut up, because I'm not gonna have that anymore. And yeah, I think I guess I would be curious, like, what this last, like, you know, this pandemic has been for you in regards to just like seeing people's behavior, yeah, and the psychology behind it. If you can't tell, I'm very fascinated. I guess I'm coming to realize for myself, the mind and psychology is really interesting to me, and I like to talk to people that I feel have a grounded perspective, because I can pull from their understanding and see how their mind works, because I recognize I'm not, you know, always right. So
that's cool. Yeah, it took 4 years of psychology. That was like my first major before I switched to philosophy, and then eventually alternative and complementary health. But psychology classes in college are just depressing. I don't recommend them.
I took 0, so yeah.
It was very robotic and just like no God or spirituality involved.
It's a reductionist, yeah.
Right. But yeah, I've had tons of people reach out and say, Matt, you moved from California to Idaho at the perfect time. Your intuition's spot on. You got out just in time. I mean, I've heard horror stories about the governor, is it Gavin Newsom, California, and just all the crazy stuff. It seems like that's like the biggest experiment, California, because there's just this fight. It seems like 50-50 people against it. And yeah, all of it is just ridiculous. I agree with you that it's a social experiment, spiritual warfare, and the masks do nothing, if not make it worse. The respirators, I believe it's 80% death rate if someone gets hooked onto that. The social distancing is just retarded. 6 feet. I mean, plexiglass is even more retarded at the grocery store. And it's really just an ignorance about the human body and human health. And I really think there's an iron connection. I mean, people might think I'm a broken record because I talk about it so much, but I believe that iron overload or excess iron activates the fear center of the cell. And this has come from iron fortified foods. We're raised on spring water, unfiltered spring water, or well water, which might be even worse. And those are the main, and even just bathing in it. But I think people are inundated with iron. They're copper deficient. They're not eating whole food vitamin C because they're afraid of fruit and the sugar, or they're not eating beef liver. So they're not getting any copper to counter the iron, because iron depletes copper most of all. Copper regulates iron, just like magnesium regulates calcium. And so I think, you know, hysteria is caused physiologically largely. And I mean, there's tons of chemicals in the water. You can go to ewg.org/tapwater database, punch in your zip code, and see how many chemicals are over the federal safety limits. And usually there's 10, 15, 20, I've even seen 30 over in some clients. And those are going in your body through your pores and affecting your mind, affecting your thought processes and your logical, rational thinking processes. So, I mean, a lot of these people that are wearing masks and social distancing, I see them drinking Mountain Dew. They're drinking bottled water that's been sitting in the sun, that's UV's hitting that plastic, and they're drinking plastic, just getting into their body and screwing up their endocrine system and their immune system, tons of things. So yeah, I think it does come down to the social experiment thing. And it really sucks if you're in an area that is, you know, in quarantine, or they're enforcing masks when you're outside,
Yeah.
which is completely satanic and draconian. It definitely shouldn't be forced. I've had Dr. Cassingro on my show, the wild oregano expert, and he was saying, if you want to wear a mask, but don't enforce it. Don't make me wear one, because that's where you cross the line. And that should be like obvious to me for people.
It's to me, it's so incredibly. It goes back to the everything's black or white. You know, it's if you don't want to wear a mask, you're a Trump supporting conservative, like conspiracy theorist. And it's like, regardless of what my beliefs are, just because I refuse to wear a mask, it's not because I think it's all bullshit, or that I may not get a virus. That's irrelevant to me. It's the fact that I should have a choice in this decision making, and that's where it really highlights the programming of it, is especially considering 90% of these people telling you we're supporting the Black Lives Matter protest, that where it was like a week, 2 days before, don't go outside. If you do, make sure you wear a mask. Don't get near people. Protest. Everything's good. Get out. Show your support. Back to this is don't be around people. Wear your mask. And it's like, if you're so unaware to just recognize the absurdity or the irony of that, I mean, at this point, any and everything could be said, and you're going to jump right on board, because it's just so incredibly obvious how absurd and how contradicting these sources of truth, truth are really, it's insane to me.
Yeah, I'm here in North Idaho, and I think Seattle got hit, supposedly, in quotes, pretty hard with the coronavirus cases. And I looked up a news article yesterday, multiple news articles, because that's where like Antifa is concentrated, like Portland, Seattle, I think, going up and down.
Yeah.
And I mean, Starbucks are getting broken into. There's, riot guards with guns everywhere. And I mean, to me, I'm a huge, I wouldn't even call it Second Amendment, because I think it's beyond that. Those weren't given by God. There's not our God-given rights. It's like we should be able to have guns beyond any constitution or man-made piece of paper. It's like, that's a right to protect ourselves, and we have that no matter where we are in the entire world. We don't have to be in the US. It's like, you should have a gun to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a large reason why I moved to Idaho, because you can get them in California, and right now people are buying tons of ammo and freaking out. It's like, guys, you're a little late to the party.
Yeah. It's not the time.
If you have a family, you have a wife and kids, I mean, I don't know if you heard of them releasing criminals from jail. Because this whole thing, it's like, someone walks on my property and they're running towards my door, I'm going to go for a headshot. And that's,
I saw a thing like, if masks mitigate exposure, why didn't they give the criminals mask, or the criminals mask while they're in jail instead of releasing them? So, right.
Yeah, we're in a really bad, I mean, you can go down so many different rabbit holes. I think Open Minds Conference, I can't remember her name. She has white hair, really interesting outfit. She had a great presentation on Agenda 21. I think she might have covered Agenda 2030. But this whole sustainable development thing with the United Nations, this program, I believe that's really the goal. And I believe the end game here is that food is going to become very expensive and very scarce. So back to permaculture or homesteading, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Having chickens, goats, having eggs and milk, which to me I could survive on, and maybe some berries and fruit and honey and maple syrup. But even just honey, I could survive on honey, eggs, and milk. I'd be very happy. Maybe some shilajit. I'd be set. And people need to think ahead to that. I mean, it's not about stockpiling water or stockpiling anything, I think, besides honey, because you can kind of almost live on honey. But it's about just becoming more sustainable, because I think starving people to death is kind of the ultimate plan. I mean, if you want to talk about how to kill people, you can use pandemics or, vaccine induced infections or all of these things. But the most effective way is just to make food really expensive or scarce. I mean, they did that with Holodomor in Russia, starved upwards of 10 million white Europeans. We never hear about that. We just hear of the Holocaust and all of these things. And so, that has been an agenda by the powers that be to just starve people out. And so if you could see that pattern, you could say, hey, wait, I'm dependent on the grocery store every week to get my food. I might want to move towards at least having some hens, or being able to defend those hens, or defend a water supply, or just even get out of the concentrated population.
Yeah.
Not to be a dooms and gloomer, but it's just, I mean, to me, it's just being logical, just looking at how people are acting. It's very zombie-like. I mean, what happens when the grocery stores are bare? People are going to lose it.
Yeah. I mean, I saw, Austin had probably a week period when this all first started that it was, I bought 200 plus pounds of grass-fed meats and stuff just to be safe and put them in my freezer. But yeah, I mean, I'm in a weird space because first off, I've when all this first started going down, I was looking at houses 2 hours outside of the city in the hill country. I was planning to get chickens, the whole thing, and then things kind of calmed down a little bit. But yeah, I mean, the thing is I can't even argue your point because I completely agree with it. I haven't completely acted upon that yet, but I'm also in a weird space too, because to me, even though Austin is still a city, Austin is actually one of the few. There's a reason I moved back here from Colorado. Is it's to me probably one of the only major cities that still maintains some level-headedness and kind of a nice balance of what's important and what's the goal in life. And because basically a lot of people here, it's very much like I always say it's like a Southern hospitality with don't fuck with me, and it's this very nice balance of welcome in, you're part of the family, but I have a gun and don't act up, don't act like an idiot. And it creates this really nice balance where, you get a little bit too much of that conservative mindset in other parts of Texas. And then obviously you get way more liberal mindsets in other, like California and stuff like that. So, I guess there's a reason why Joe Rogan's moving to Texas. But yeah, it's a weird mix of and nice thing is too, is what's great about Austin. And I think it definitely helps with, mitigating EMF exposure and stuff, is there's just an insane amount of trees and nature. I think you came here not too long ago, but within downtown where, I live less than 2 miles from the heart of, downtown, and my entire property is surrounded by trees, and I'm 5 minutes from the river. And so, I would say that's probably one of the main reasons why I haven't completely left it yet, because I at least have some feeling of being connected to nature and not totally trapped, because I'm a 2-hour drive to middle of nowhere, Texas. So yeah, it's interesting to I guess what would be if you don't have that as an option right now. Do you have kind of I know you have obviously a ton of things to recommend, but do you have kind of top 3 things to really, to focus on or try to incorporate into your daily habits that would help get you maybe more prepared, or just more mentally clear? If it's not physical movement to another city, maybe it's just mental clarity that offers you more connection to yourself and intuitiveness to when it's time to do that. What do you feel like is probably the best supplements or the best just overall practices to really get your mindset straight, regardless of your environment?
Yeah. First, I just want to comment on that. I definitely agree. I felt great when I was in Austin. That was I was very surprised when I left. I was like, I don't feel drained and tired. I actually feel kind of energized. And I do believe the trees are absolute EMF sinks, that they ground it out, and especially the body of water. If you have those two, like a huge river and trees, um, you're really doing well. Um, so that's awesome. And I noticed there's a lot of really good like animal foods around there, and so it's like a very like farming,
Yeah.
animal agriculture kind of vibe.
Are you, you're aware? Obviously, you're aware of Epic Bars.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so the guys that started that, I think they are from Austin, and they started a company called Force of Nature as well that they just started in the last year, and they're basically raising wild animals like venison, wild boar, bison, and then obviously beef, all grass fed, all pasture raised, and they sell it now like at local stores. They have a blend of bison and cow, or like individual, but they do like heart, liver, and muscle meat combinations, and I'm like, I'll happily promote them, because that's been my like savior for not, if I don't want to buy specifically just beef liver, I can go to the grocery store and get that mixture, make burgers with it, and there's no, nobody's gonna know that's in there. So it is nice to have people that are, in some ways doing the best they can to create a balanced approach, and I guess their overall message too is restoring land through animal agriculture, which we need more of that. I think it's great to see that turning in that direction, instead of just like these large factory farms, even if they are grass fed or pasture raised. I don't think their intention is not to restore native lands. So
Oh, definitely. Yeah. There was recently, like, I think a farmer, I think it was in Texas, it went viral, and he's like, I have to kill off a ton of my cattle, and it was this horrible thing, but I believe they already sacrificed their quality. So it was almost just like it was inevitable. They weren't doing like a Joel Salatin kind of thing. They're most likely selling to Costco or cheap,
yeah.
fast food chains. And so I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. But I think people should definitely, kind of be a grass farmer, like Joel Salatin says, instead of a beef farmer. So, yeah, three things for mental clarity. I mean, I always start with water. I've been talking about that for years, and I mean, you could jump to just a pristine hydro water filter. I believe that's the best if you can get like acid-free, contaminant-free, bicarbonate-rich water, which to me is natural water. But even just doing steps, if you're not there yet, it's like $800 for the travel system that you can make into an under counter. If you can't do that, just finding a water store. If you can't do that, finding a water dispenser, like at a health food store versus like a grocery store. And usually in big towns, I wouldn't be surprised if Austin has like a water store where it's like a little oasis, and you go up and there's tons of spigots and there's a little ozone washer. Usually those are in major cities, but even if they don't have that, pretty much everywhere has these little water dispensers at a health food store, generally the better ones.
So I do the reverse osmosis right now, which I know is not the ideal, but do you recommend supplementing anything within that? Like if I'm going to Whole Foods or a local grocery store here and getting reverse osmosis water, what do you recommend adding to that, if anything, to at least bring some life back to it?
Yeah, I used to use concentrates. I experimented with multiple different things. I was using like silica and all these different things. And now I've just kind of simplified. If I do spike my water, it's with more bicarbonates, especially magnesium bicarbonate. I'm actually releasing like a little innovative magnesium supplement in the next
Awesome.
probably 2 weeks. Um, you'll still make your own magnesium, but it'll make it a little easier with what I'm doing. So I always recommend people get the SodaStream Jet. I had the Soda Sparkle for years, where it's just, it's not a plastic machine that you put the bottle into. It's just the bottle and you screw on thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they sell that anymore, but the SodaStream Jet, just to be able to make your own carbonated water. I mean, carbonated water is super beneficial for the metabolism, for digestion, for energy levels, and that is a source of carbon dioxide. That's great. Nice. Yeah.
I hope Topo Chico's not bad, because I drink an ungodly amount of it. It's like it's if you live in Texas, it's kind of just like they go hand in hand.
I think making your own is optimal, just because you're going to get cleaner water. And it's amazing how long those SodaStream CO2 cartridges last.
Mhm.
And they even have like you can send them back. So if you get like 2, I think one lasts like a month, and you can just use it up and then just keep recycling it and send it back to them. And they'll refill it and send it back or whatever. Yeah, I think carbonating your own water is an upgrade for sure. And you can make like sparkling hibiscus tea and go crazy and have fun doing different things. But yeah, I'd say magnesium bicarbonate is the best thing to add to it. We just do shots throughout the day.
Mhm.
I think that's great to do whatever water you're on. But definitely get off tap. I used to work with a substitute teacher that was an engineer and really smart technical guy. And he's like, yeah, I'm drinking tap water because it's environmentally friendly. And I'm like, do you know how much stuff's in tap water? And I would always like gently argue with them, and he wouldn't budge.
Yeah, it's so foreign to me, and it kind of boggles my mind to think that people still drink tap water, you know. And it's kind of the same with soda. Like, I guess, you know, you can have a Mexican Coke, it's not the worst thing in the world, but like a traditional corn syrup, you know, high fructose corn syrup soda or tap water, it's just, you know, even when I didn't know anything about health, I remember at 18 years old, I was like, I'm never going to drink a soda again. And I was still eating fast food, but my mind just was like, there's just something terribly wrong with this. So yeah, it's mind blowing to me that that people, that's you know, you wonder why people don't see what's going on, and then you think, oh well, they're they're fueled by tap water and Dr. Pepper. So it's not, I guess, rocket science to figure out maybe there's a connection there.
Yeah, and high fructose corn syrup, people don't realize, is largely starch. And a lot of people have problems with starch, even well-cooked starch. If they do like a baked potato, that can still wreck them if they're super compromised with their gut. And so that high fructose corn syrup, it's just increasing intestinal wall permeability. And so all that toxicity, especially endotoxin, like lipopolysaccharide, like this toxin that pathogenic bacteria release, that gets into the bloodstream and then causes systemic stress, makes iron overload worse, iron oxidation, lipofuscin formation. So it's really a domino effect of a lot of things, but a lot of people just having holes in their gut, not only from glyphosate that's often talked about, but just from high fructose corn syrup, which they wouldn't look at as punching holes in their gut.
Yeah.
But it can. So just soda with cane sugar, you know, the old school, it's definitely better.
So water. Sorry, guys, I keep steering it off topic, but yeah. So water. And then what would you say?
Yeah, I would say visiting farms, because I started to do that even when I was going back and forth with vegetarian and eating meat, and it really just gave me perspective to like connect more with reality and my food supply. And I was going to mountains in Southern California and visiting small farms and kind of underground buying milk, because it's quasi legal to buy raw milk in California, and just seeing the goats and seeing, you know, the process and the whole thing. It really started to just kind of open me up to a deeper, more intimate connection with my food supply that's going to create my body. And so I always recommend that people, you know, visit farms. You know, they often have like berry picking. You can go and pick berries on a farm, or, you know, milk the goats or the cows yourself, or even just picking up from the farm directly. Because a lot of people will just pick up their food from the health food store, and then maybe the co-op is the next step. But the even better step is to go direct to the farm and get your eggs and your milk direct from the farm. There's just something about that is nice, just to build that relationship with your farmer.
I actually, so right before I moved from Denver, I was doing 2 or 3 months of a raw milk share, because obviously it's like semi-legal where you can't buy it at the stores, but you can buy a share in a cow. Yeah, and so we went out to the farm, and man, if you didn't already appreciate just having raw milk, when you actually see the process of having to take care of those cows and the process of just having to milk them daily and how much goes into that, it's a different level of appreciation that I think, if anything, it goes back to this whole idea of why things are so distorted as a society. It's because we're just so disconnected from most processes that I think humble us and make us realize how life really works and how like what's actually going on behind the scenes constantly day in day out. To come to a little bit more of an understanding and appreciation for these things. But yeah, when you just buy it from a carton at the store, there's no connect understanding of what's actually going on. And if anything, I think that's probably the silver lining of veganism, is at least it makes you question like where are these things coming from, and then once you inevitably, either you die of starvation or you decide to eat animal products again, you'll come to a way deeper understanding of the value and importance of those animal products, and in some way want to be connected to that process. I think is it's a total shift in how you come to see your food, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being reliant on the grocery store for all of your food is definitely unnatural.
Yeah, it's cool to see you and Tristan, and I'm trying to think of like really anybody else right now in the health community that really has homestead. I guess Dave Asprey is kind of doing his own thing up in Canada. But yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a ton of other people really go fully in on that.
It's a lot of work. It's definitely a sacrifice, and I think most people don't have like goats or cows till they have children. But there's easy ways to. I've done my best to like automate it, and I guess my top recommendations would be an automatic milker. Like I just got this Ultimate Easy milker, and so it's actually like a little pump that's not very loud, and I just hook it up to the udder because my hands would get sore, and I would milk for a half hour, and my hand would literally hurt after that half hour because it's just constant squeezing. So literally, I just hook this thing up. It takes half the time, and it's gentler on the goat. An Ultimate Easy milker, it's life changing. And an automatic chicken door yesterday, just installed that with the help of a carpenter, and basically extended the shed. So now the goats have a little indoor area connected to an outdoor area, so they can roam back and forth, and they have a significant amount of space with fresh or wild forage, plants. So they have their selection of minerals, and it's really fun. It's really fun to homestead. And I would say getting chickens is the best start because something that you have to milk, I think a cow might be easier than a goat because goats are kind of like a little crazier, especially if you get a male. You have a buck that attacks me every time I walk in. But
yeah, also anytime you're trying to milk a male goat, it usually doesn't go well. So.
It's like, what are you doing? Yeah, we're keeping it to eventually breed to have
goats
and then a buck.
I figured you were more informed than that. Yeah.
But yeah, milk. I mean, milk is just I'm obsessed, and it's just it's amazing. I mean, Ray Pete is almost on a milk diet. It's really funny. Like anytime, like Patrick Timpone or anyone will ask him in an interview, "What do you have for breakfast today, Ray?" It's coffee con leche. Coffee and milk, and that's his breakfast often. And I'll drink up to a half gallon a day sometimes. I'm trying to drink even more, but it's so calorically dense that I'm just so full that I don't even eat food. So it's like, I don't want to be a liquidarian again.
Yeah. Yeah, I would honestly, man. I mean, just from so I really only eat breakfast and dinner. I have no desire to really eat lunch, but milk has been kind of the staple. I wish I could get raw milker, and I think I can. I have to drive like an hour and a half, so I'm probably going to eventually start getting into that. But there's a local supplier that's low temperature pasteurized and non-homogenized, so it's as good as you're going to get from like a grocery store. But yeah, I mean, I just it's probably my European heritage, but I thrive with milk, and I know some people don't, but it doesn't cause any skin issues or anything, and it's just the easiest way to get nutrition in your body and feel good, and yeah, it was like the guilt of drinking milk after listening to you talk about it and Ray Pete. I'm like, thank God, now I can actually enjoy milk again and not feel like it's a bad thing or that there's too much sugar or whatever, whatever your current diet is. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I think what you're on is great. Actually, I just interviewed Kate Deering yesterday for my podcast, and she wrote this book, which I recommend to everybody: How to Heal Your Metabolism. It was my introduction to this whole field, and just really easy to understand, kind of lays it out in almost non-scientific terms. So for the layman, they can just jump into kind of balancing their metabolism. But um, yeah, she was saying that ultra pasteurized or pasteurized could be better than raw milk for a lot of people while they're because it could take years to heal the
Hmm.
metabolism, from the crazy experiments that we did. And so I think low pasteurized milk that you're drinking is absolutely fine. It might even be better for you than the raw milk. You'd have to experiment. Um, but yeah, that's awesome. And I actually created a supplement called Dairy Absorb, just lactase enzyme.
Hmm.
So if someone wants to enjoy a big bowl of ice cream, not get bloated, whatever, and could be a temporary thing that they use, or if they just want to, jumpstart their absorption of dairy since they've been vegan or non-dairy for a while. It's a really great way to do it because it breaks down that primary sugar called lactose in the milk, which is glucose and galactose. So, yeah, I think a point about sugar is people just say sugar, 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 sugar. That's what the keto people will say on social media, but it's not true. There's different sugars. There's glucose, fructose, galactose. There's multiple different types of sugar. Um, invertase in honey. Honey has multiple different types of sugar that are very easily digested. Fructose is usually the easiest digested for people. Lactose, usually people have issues just because they've been restricting dairy. And so their
Yeah.
system needs to go slow to build up that lactase enzyme production, or you can supplement or do both. But
It's almost nowadays, like, to me, just almost a guaranteed red flag when any one thing is just so highly demonized. And it's like, it used to be fat, now it's sugar. Whether it's eating meat, not eating meat, it's just it's I I'm starting to find it's the people kind of in the gray area that find a balanced approach to it, and that's why I guess, yeah, like your perspective in Ray Pete's was very interesting to me, coming off of all these extreme perspectives and challenges. I thank God I had the time to listen to you in between my cold showers and my one meal a day. But yeah, it's I think that's really where, like, our society needs to find some balance in general. And I know the physical is a huge extension of the mental, and I think it really does kind of highlight the psychology of where our society is, just based on our extreme actions and diet nowadays. It's like, when did food become so overly complicated? And yeah, I mean, there's a ton of factors that go into it, but yeah, that's why I loved Repeat. And his approach was, I'd listened to quite a few interviews with him when I first got into him, just uh, not only being blown away, but how good his memory is at his age, and how fluid he talks for how old he is. But yeah, just the ease of it is like, it was the first time I'd actually listened to somebody. I'm like, this doesn't seem overly complex. Get in some really high nutrient dense foods. Don't be afraid of sugar. Enjoy your coffee, and don't starve yourself. And it's like, okay, I think I can do that. And it's like the first time since really just starting my journey in health that I felt, if I were God, or if just looking at from God's perspective, I don't feel it would be so complicated that the average person couldn't come to understand it. And that's, for me, like, I think intelligence is simplicity in a lot of ways. And yeah, so that to me was very relieving, I guess.
yeah, absolutely. And the more you learn, I mean, I've gone so deep down the rabbit hole just because it's my life study of NPK fertilizer, acid rain, biogeochemical cycles are off, everything's distorted. We killed and mutated the microbes in the soil, killed the fungal hyphae. No fungus. It used to be 5,000 fungus. Now there's barely any. It just totally disrupted the whole cycle. But we still do our best, and we still have to eat something. And so I just say, like, take your magnesium bicarbonate, take your Shilajit, your vitamin E. Those are like the starting things. And then if you want to get into other things, big fan of K27. I've reversed
Hmm.
personal teeth issues with MK7 in higher amounts that you can find in the health food store with benefit. And yeah, just add in things and experiment. And do you want to hit number 3 since
Let's
we
do
to
it.
finish up?
And it'll be 8 hours later before we do, but yeah.
I was just gonna say light because I was amazed years ago, just working retail, working indoors for 6, 8 hours a day, being in school and then going to work, just how much of an indoor existence I was living. And so when I learned about light therapy and I started reading, I think Jacob Lieberman, Light, the Future of Medicine. That was one of my favorite light books. There's a lot of books on light and different wavelengths of light and
Yeah,
how
I
they
actually
can.
bought. I think I got one that you recommended a while ago. I think it was like Body of Light or something, but it may be a completely different way you think now. But just curious.
Yeah, I think his was like a little bit philosophical. Like he went into the glands and the hormones that are secreted with light stimulation, but he also talked about like different seasons, like winter and summer and autumn and fall, and how that's related to light and the color in plants. And it was really like it was a pretty deep book. I really enjoyed. Uh, but I got into light, I would say like 4 or 5 years ago, just by building my own sauna on the floor in Home Depot with PVC pipe. And I made the 250-watt chicken lamps and I mounted 4 to a wooden board, got some painter's canvas, put it on the PVC frame. And it took up like a third of my RV that I was renting. And I would sit in that thing. I was obsessed because I was like, this feels like food. And I would sit in there and just soak up the light for I mean, I think my record was 6 or 8 hours in that thing straight. And I would just read a book or, do an Instagram live or whatever, make a YouTube video. And um, it was amazing how I felt in that. And that's mainly near in mid infrared light. There's also some far infrared, a little bit of visible red, I believe. But that's the cheap way to do it. I know that's big in the Ray Peat community. It does put off a lot of heat. So I'd recommend you either have AC or you live in a cold climate if you're going to do that route, because it's going to add a lot of heat to the room to shine that on you. And you need a longer dose. So it's like you point it on you and just leave it on you for an hour or two while you're working. The more practical way is just LED lights. I like Gemba Red, but there's a million companies out there. I would just say beware of the ones that are like thousands of dollars, because those are generally overpriced. And just getting into a light therapy, whether it be a device or the sun, can be very, very beneficial. What I like about red light is that it protects the cells from ultraviolet light, which we know causes damage. I used to believe, when I was in the DHA mindset, that the more the better. UV light is not damaging, as they've lied to us again. We need to like unlearn, but it's obvious that it causes photo damage and it ages the skin, especially if there's PUFAs or polyunsaturated fats or omega-3s that have incorporated into the skin. And lipofuscin, we know, reacts with UV light and it actually spreads it. It increases its accumulation.
This is why I only sunbathe with canola oil. So,
so what I used to recommend is like taking your fish oil or algae oil or krill oil or omega-3 before you go out in the sun. Now it's the opposite. It's literally the opposite. Taking vitamin E before you go out in the sun, and it's cheaper. And as I said, you don't have to buy mine. Mine's actually out until mid to late August anyway. But take a good vitamin E before you go out in the sun, and or do red light therapy. There's a lot of people that are sensitive to the sun, and that's most likely because of PUFA poisoning or lipofuscinosis, as it's called. So those people especially can do vitamin E plus red light therapy before they go out, and that'll protect them. Or just getting morning sun, because usually the red spectrum's higher with morning and late afternoon sun. So that's like a safer time to sunbathe. I would say people that are sensitive or have been on a high PUFA diet or know they were raised on canola oil, really just avoid midday sun. I wouldn't recommend sunscreen, but cover up with like a wide brimmed hat or a long sleeve. And 5 or 10 minutes is fine, but just don't do prolonged sun exposure because it's going to complex with estrogen, which is increased by PUFAs and fasting, and iron and aluminum, which a lot of people tend to have from melted cheese and stuff, a lot of aluminum. And just kind of getting into a better light routine, and also blocking blue light at night just with blue blocking glasses. I like Carbon Shade. It's a good brand.
Okay.
But there's other good ones. And so I think people usually in the city have a messed up relationship with light. We have all orange and red bulbs here in the house. So there's a website called lightbulbs.com because it's almost impossible to find them now at your hardware store. And we use A19 incandescent lights. And yes, they use more electricity, so they're not really off-grid friendly unless you have a lot of solar panels. A lot of off-grid people up here use LEDs. Like that's you better be wearing blue blocking glasses and long sleeve at night.
Yeah. So that and this, light is something I try to get out in the sun every morning. But yeah, having like a bulb or something in my house is really kind of the next step that I really want to take a step forward with. But yeah, I think it's going to be, we're already seeing it. It's really interesting, based on your third kind of the answer with light, seeing the effects of people being indoors for the past, I mean, obviously offices weren't much better, but I think at least people went out to lunch and, got outside in between lunch and stuff like that. But with this whole pandemic, it's like we're seeing firsthand like the suicide and depression rates going up exponentially. And I guarantee in a lot of ways, other than the fact that we're not socially interacting with other humans, we're not getting proper light exposure whatsoever, which I'm sure is just adding to the effect of not having your friends and family to connect with.
Yeah, it definitely screws up our mood, our neurotransmitters. That's well known. I think I might be one of the few people talking about it. I think Adam Bergstrom's talked about it a bit, but the lipofuscin in the eye connection with light, because that's really bad. It's called the retinal pigmented epithelial cells. And in our retina, we have like super mitochondria that are just coated with photoreceptors. We have like a melanopsin, and it's like this super sensitive photoreceptor to I think it's like 5 photons of light. It's like very, very sensitive. And so when people are like staring at their iPad all day or their iPhone, or they're at the office, telemarketer, whatever they're doing, it's just constant eye time with blue light, and they're not on vitamin E, which really helps to protect the eyes in the research.
And they're recycling air through their mask now.
Right. Yeah, I mean, wearing like yellow lens glasses can help while looking at screens, or even clear glasses, because it reduces the flicker. But I usually, because I'm on vitamin E, I feel safe not wearing yellow glasses, but I do wear like orange ones at night, and it doesn't distort the colors too much if I want to watch YouTube videos or whatever. Have my ice cream. But yeah, I think another good strategy too is like not turning on the light when you go to the bathroom at night. Like if you're brushing your teeth or doing your skincare routine, or even getting up to pee in the middle of the night, Gemba Red just released this little LED strip with a sticker. I think it's like 10, 15, it's like under $20. I can't remember how much. And you just stick it on the wall, and it senses infrared, and so it turns on when you walk there, and it turns off after 15 seconds, and it lights up the whole bathroom red. And so you never have to even turn on your light. That's like a really quick fix. You don't have to switch out your bulbs. And little things like that make a huge difference, because just getting that light exposure in the middle of the night, that really screws up your hormonal balance. And I've experimented a little bit with like progesterone, pregnenolone, and DHEA supplementation, getting into the repeat stuff. Like Georgie Dinkoff and Danny Roddy are big fans of taking those.
So I asked you the other day, and you basically recommended it was a cream, right, for progesterone?
Yeah, Ona's Naturals. I think she's in Long Beach, that company, and they make a cream. I'm trying to think. Yeah. Oh, well, there's Progest E, but I think it's like the vitamin E is derived from soy or something. But
Yeah,
but that one tastes good. But yeah, the cream's really easy to use. And oh yeah, Ona's Naturals does make a tincture, but that doesn't
cool.
taste very good. It definitely tastes like way worse than the Progest E one.
We've
It
been
works.
through the trials of terrible supplement. So I forced myself to be raw vegan for 8 months. So I pretty much anything I can stomach.
Yeah, I think the cream's nice because you don't have to taste anything, and it does work. But yeah, there's this big debate in the community right now. Like, it's not necessary. It can mess people up. It can increase cortisol. Can convert into estrogen. Blah blah blah. I've never experienced any ill effects. I think probably if you're younger and you're not as messed up from more years of bad choices, then it's probably safer. But I think I've enjoyed pregnenolone the most. 100 to 200 milligrams pregnenolone pills. Definitely feel that. But yeah, the world of supplementation is just crazy. I mean, there's so many different directions to go. I like to just prioritize the best ones. I like putting like cordyceps or reishi in my coffee. That's been like a constant practice for years that I definitely feel, or lion's mane.
Yeah, there's been a few. I mean, after the whole vegan thing, after doing one meal a day, it's like there's really nothing more depressing than having to take 30 plus supplements in a day. But there's been a few consistencies, and yeah, mushrooms have been one of them. And then honestly, from your recommendations, I've really pretty much only taken like vitamin E, some vitamin K2, and then yeah, Shilajit. I still have some Shilajit here, but overall, nothing really. Nothing really else. It's just it's to me, it's like if you're eating properly, it shouldn't have to be this strenuous process, which I think is like I said earlier, it's this idea of our society being afraid to die and not being spiritually connected, so we seek any and everything that will make us feel that that's not happening and that I can avoid this. And I think that's where a lot of people mistake a desire or a passion for nutrition and health. It's like, no. It's there's nothing wrong with wanting to increase your longevity and take care of your body. And, the body is a temple, so take care of it. But it's when it becomes this thing that it's all you are, that you kind of lose yourself in it. And I think we've both found ourselves in that place for sure.
Yeah. Adam Bergstrom's called it Hallmark syndrome, I think, where you go and you look at the birthday cards and you're over the hill, you're over the hump. It's all downhill from here, and they're all negative, and it's supposed to be funny, but that's like casting a spell on people that you're aging, you're going to be in pain, you're going to hurt, you're going to get, all these problems, and it's just a part of life. But
it's great. It's great marketing language. Yeah.
Right. I don't think we have to get stiffer as we age. I think we can become more flexible as we age. That's my goal. I still have a long way to go. The area that I probably have to improve the most on is with the body work. And there's some tools that you can use. Like I have the stretcher, the lumbar spinal decompression. That's really powerful. Been really enjoying the rapid release little thing. It's kind of like the Hypervolt, but you can actually use it on the bone because it's more gentle. And just if you have a partner, just manual massage, even 5 minutes a day, can be very helpful. But that fibrosis, that scar tissue, you really need, like, I have friends that are into trigger pointing or deep manual therapy. That's definitely something to prioritize for longevity that's often overlooked. It's like, if you want to live longer and not be in pain, it's like, do the body work stuff.
Yeah, that's on my list of absolute necessities right now, and including it in my weekly or monthly, is getting a deep tissue massage, because I out of all of my health issues, my stiffness in my hips from 15 years of like competitive soccer just all the time, I have hips of like a 50, 60-year-old man. So I have to get on it before, it's getting better, but yeah, it's one of those that I think goes overlooked for sure, because we're so focused on what we're eating and what we're supplementing with. But man, if you haven't felt like a different person after a 45-hour-long massage, then yeah, I mean, there's almost nothing that has made me feel as good supplement wise as just like a really long massage. So yeah, that's a good point to make.
You
But
mean 45-minute, not 45 hours, right?
well, I'll take 45 hours if I need to, but I've yet to find somebody who's willing to do that.
2 days straight. It's the
Well,
marathon.
awesome, man. Let's wrap up. You wanted to throw out, because I didn't mention at the beginning, but throw out your podcast, your Instagram, and then your Mito Life company as well, because I think I've taken your vitamin E and I love it. And as soon as you get the Shilajit back in, or if you already have that, then I'll try to. I know it goes in and out, but yeah.
Yeah. So my website's matt-blackburn.com, and I often add recommended products to there, and sometimes take them off, but mostly we're just adding. I just put camel milk on there. If you've never had that, it's kind of a fun one to take. What's cool is you can order it frozen, then just keep it as like your stash. If stuff goes downhill, you have some camel milk as a backup. They have sales sometimes that are really good too. But that's kind of the hub. Through that website, you can find my podcast and all my other things on there. Even my CLF protocol under the blogs. Need to start writing more blog posts. I've been so busy with the homestead, getting it going here and sustainable and automatic. But that's the calcification, lipofuscin, fibrosis protocol that I designed. And that's to remove the long-term accumulations from a lot of poor decisions. So you can kind of combine a lot of these things that I talk about in my podcast, Mito Life Radio, with the CLF protocol, and maybe even Morley Robbins, like root cause protocol, then people could see a lot of results. It's definitely more effective than like a lot of the mold or heavy metal protocols, or just these constant like glyphosate. There's just so many like little protocol detox paths you can go down. And to me, I really think what I laid out in the blog is pretty foundational for most. I mean, I get crazy testimonials, so the proof is kind of there with the results people are getting. And then my podcast is Mito Life Radio. I just reached over 80 episodes, and that's a lot of fun. I release a new episode every Friday, and I keep it mostly focused on health. Every month or two, I'll have an episode about Jesus Christ and spirituality. Had a really good interview with Stephen Bancars, which I recommended. He was actually running Spirit Science, and then he went back to Christ.
Yeah, I used to watch his stuff all the time.
Yeah. I like how he breaks it down. That episode he's really smart about quantum physics, so that was a fun one. I kind of couldn't follow though, because my mind doesn't think that technically.
I'm the same way. Yeah. I'm good with like human relationships and communicating, but when it comes to analytical numbers, dude, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not your guy.
Yeah, the Paul Reese one was fun too. He's a really down to earth guy. He's actually in Austin. Yeah, I think you guys should meet up.
Cool.
He's a really good friend. And yeah, the first episode was fun. He talked about his experience with psychedelics and seeing a UFO and music festivals, and that was a fun one.
Sounds like my 20s. So UFOs, music festivals, and psychedelics. So yeah.
Yeah, and then my brand Mito Life, I kind of relaunched last year, and yeah, I just have foundational supplements on there, and I'm constantly kind of upgrading them. And that's really like R&D is really fun for me. So thinking up supplements that I want to take in like higher amounts that I just come out with. And so, yeah, I have Panacea on there, like pure Shilajit tablets, which are easier than the powder. I still put the pristine hydro powder Shilajit in my coffee. I think there's something to that. But I also stack it with, I mean, the tablets go great with a steak too, if you've never tried that.
Awesome.
And because it has an effect on iron. I have systemic enzymes, digestive enzymes, the dairy absorb, gluten enzymes that I just discounted, discontinuing that, and vitamin E and K27. And so on Mito Instagram, it's Mito Life, and then Matt Blackburn. And I don't post as many stories as I used to, but you can go to my story highlights, or I even post my lives now on my wall. And I've just been trying to get off social media a little more, just connect with reality more. It's a challenge. I love helping people, but
yeah, it's a double-edged sword. And I think a lot of us are hitting, at least for me, I've hit a point of the evaluation on really my relationship to social media and how much is essential and how much is just completely unnecessary. So yeah, man, dude, I want to thanks for jumping on. You're officially the first guest. But yeah, I mean, just in general, I appreciate your commitment to health and staying open-minded and trying to learn. And I think that's a sign of a person who seeks truth is knowing that they don't know and constantly being humbled by their experiments. So yeah, man, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. It was
all right,
an honor.
Matt.
Thanks so much.
All right, man, take it easy.